Well, I think the reason that the whole bright green thing is as popular as it is because it allows people a fantasy that this way of life can continue, and it does exactly what this way of life does, which is ignore the consequences of this way of life. I mean, I'm really appalled at the either rank stupidity or the willful ignorance of a lot of the people who advocate for this whole bright green way of life. And what I mean by that is I was having this so-called debate with this one bright green advocate. Okay, you've got a city, and cities have always required the importation of resources from the countryside. And where do you get, you've got a city, you've got New York City. Where do you get the water? The water comes from someplace else. Where do you get the food? Where does the poop go? Where do you get the wood? Where do you get the wiring for electricity? And they always ignore. The only way that people who advocate bright green things can even pretend to advocate what they advocate is through ignoring the consequences of their actions and through choosing only tiny little bits of it. It's like one of the high priests of the deep green movement, or I'm sorry, one of the high priests of the bright green movement is William McDonough. And he has, he describes all these great projects he does, like putting native grasses on a Ford truck plant roof. And are you kidding me that this is what's called sustainable? The last thing this world needs is another truck factory. And the last thing this world needs is another truck. So sure, I think it's great that you put native grasses on top of a factory. That's a great thing. I have no problem with incrementalism. I'm not being a hyper purist here. It's just, let's be honest, where do you get the metal for the trucks? It's like when I was having that so-called debate with the bright green guy, one of the things he said is that you can have 100% metals recycling. And it only took me about an hour of research to look up some stuff about metals recycling that just showed that his whole argument was bogus. Like, to recycle aluminum requires that you heat the aluminum to about 650 degrees C. And how do you do that sustainably? And the aluminum recycling is an incredibly toxic process. It produces a lot of, I don't remember right now what the toxics are, but it's like he was talking about metals recycling. Also, only 20 miles from where he lives, there's this former steel recycling plant that the groundwater now is more toxic than drain cleaner. And also, it ignores the fact that the demand continues to go up in this culture for metals. And so even if there was 100% recycling, you'd still have to have bauxite mines. And these mines are somewhere else. So the only way they can do this is by ignoring all context. I mean, people talk about wind energy, but they don't so often talk about the rare earths mining that has turned parts of China completely toxic. That's necessary in order to have these windmills. And they don't talk about the effects of windmills on bats or birds. And that's the only way they can rationalize all this stuff. Another big problem with the environmental movement is that we've gone into this lifestylist dead end where there's this notion that if I can just be personally pure enough, that will actually make a difference. But it's just nonsense for a bunch of reasons. One of them is that if you take water use, about 90% of the water used by humans is used by agriculture and industry. And the same amount of water is used by human beings in cities, but that's completely trivial compared to the real uses. And it's the same with oil. The biggest user of oil on the planet is the U.S. military. So yeah, I can drive, I can never drive anywhere, and I can walk. And does anybody actually think that's going to make any difference? I mean, nobody would have thought that it would have stopped Hitler to simply walk. Riding bikes to work is going to stop, the Nazi threat, or it's going to stop apartheid. And likewise, we can all attempt to reduce our trash. And I produce like one bag of trash every, one little itty bitty bread bag full of trash every couple weeks. And so I can feel all righteous about that, but that's all it is feeling righteous, because the average person in the United States produces about 2,000 pounds of trash a year, and I could be off by 500 pounds. You know, it's 2,000, 2,500, something like that, 2,800, I don't know. Anyway, so let's say you reduce that to zero. That's great. I got bad news for you, because the average per capita production of trash in the United States is about 26 tons, and 97% of it is produced by industry. So even if I reduce my trash to zero, that's, you know, if I wear tennis shoes till I fall off my feet, if I never buy anything with any packaging, and on and on and on, that's great, but that doesn't alter the fact that 97% of the trash is actually produced by industry. And so the point is that the task of an activist is to take down these systems of power. The problem is these unequal systems of power where those in power, the capitalists, those at the top, exploit everyone and everything. And they're not stopping. And sure, I have no problem. I mean, I win any simple living contest that there is because A, I have no children. I'm not going to have children. I had a vasectomy. B, every penny I have goes into protecting forests, which means my carbon footprint is actually quite negative. I'm protecting more than 40 acres of forest, and so I could like fly first class with one butt cheek on every seat, and it wouldn't matter because the trees here are sequestering so much carbon. So my point is, I've got some credentials in terms of simple living, but it's nonsense. I mean, that doesn't help. The salmon are still going extinct. Salmon aren't going extinct because of my position. Salmon are going extinct because dams are standing. And we need to look at those larger questions. And the reason that the green fests are so popular, and the reason that all of bright green lies are so popular, is because they're easy, and they allow people the fantasy that this exploitative way of life can continue. And it can't. It's like after Fukushima, a Japanese minister said that of course they're going to continue with their nuclear power plants because we can't imagine living without electricity. Well, you better imagine living without electricity, because the industrial generation of electricity is not sustainable. And it's never been, it never will be. And like 2 billion people on the planet right now live without electricity. And actually, humans lived quite well, thank you very much, without electricity for almost all of our existence, up until 100 years ago. It all comes down to this great line. In my book, Culture Make Believe, I wrote about this pro-slavery philosopher. One of the things I did in that book is I wrote about the arguments, both for and against slavery in 1830s United States. And one of the arguments for slavery was that how could we possibly have the comforts or elegancies upon which our way of life is based without slavery? And that's really what we're talking about, is the world is being killed so people can have comforts and elegancies, which includes laptop computers, it includes electricity, it includes, you know, strawberries in January, it includes all that. And I want to be really clear. The Tolowa Indians lived where I live now, and they lived very, very well for 12,500 years, and they did so without killing the place. This is not a human problem, it's a cultural problem. They didn't have space heaters, they didn't have stereos, and they had salmon. They had salmon, and they had a lot of food. They had salmon. Salmon were so thick that people were afraid to put their boats in the water. The white people, when they got here, were afraid to put their boats in the water for fear they would capsize. The rivers were full of salmon.